A new group has come forward claiming to know who killed Jimmy Hoffa and where the one-time Teamsters boss is buried.
He vanished without a trace. For decades, the world searched for answers. The rumors never stopped. But now, science has done what decades of investigation could not. In 2025, a scientific breakthrough exposed a dark secret buried in plain sight. Join us as we unravel the horrifying truth behind Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance. The FBI and casebreakers' discovery. Hoffa's passing was officially declared in 1982, yet nearly 50 years after his disappearance, no one knows where he is. Jimmy Hoffa's notorious disappearance might be explained by a clue involving playing cards, and investigators are urging the FBI to conduct a new search. Hoffa, who was the former president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, disappeared on July 30, 1975, after being stood up for a lunch meeting on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan. This expert team of investigators suspects that Hoffa is buried beneath the old stadium of the Milwaukee Brewers. They think he was reburied under the third base area in 1995. The 62-year-old called his wife from a payphone, informing her that his associates had not arrived, but he would be home by 4 p.m. for a steak dinner. However, Hoffa never made it to his dinner reservation, and his car was later discovered abandoned in the parking lot of the restaurant he had called from. What happened to him afterward is still a complete mystery. Many believe Hoffa was unalived by mobsters after his efforts to revive his political career upset some members of the mafia. Numerous theories, conspiracies, and false leads have surfaced in the nearly 5 decades since, but no one has been charged in connection with the case, and Hoffa's body has never been located. In recent years, multiple excavations have been conducted in the hunt for Hoffa's remains, but none have yielded positive results, including 5 different sites in Michigan and New Jersey. The latest search occurred under New Jersey's Pulaski Skyway Bridge in 2022, following a promising lead from the son of a former mobster, but once again, investigators found nothing. An independent investigative group known as the Casebreakers is pushing the FBI to conduct another search, this time in Wisconsin. The Casebreakers, which includes many former law enforcement officials and ex-detectives, believes that Hoffa's remains were hidden under the old Milwaukee Brewers stadium back in the mid-1990s. The clue that led them to this belief was written on an ace of spades playing card by a dying ex-Chicago cop, Harold Walters, who had connections to the notorious Chicago outfit mafia leader, Joey Aiuppa. Jim Zimmerman, a law enforcement veteran with 40 years of experience, learned about the card from his girlfriend Michelle, who is Walters' niece, in 1996. He agreed to keep it a secret because she feared possible retaliation. On the card, Walters noted J. Hoffa at the top, along with a mention of Aiuppa, a meeting date of 9/16/95, and a location labeled as Third Base Milwaukee Ballpark. The Casebreakers think the ballpark referred to is the now demolished Milwaukee County Stadium. The third base of County Stadium is currently situated under a parking lot next to the present Brewers Stadium, American Family Field. Walters passes away. On April 2020, Michelle decided to share the card with the Casebreakers. By June 2020, a ground scan was conducted at the former Milwaukee County Stadium site. In October 2023, a K-9 search was carried out, leading to 4 alerts for human remains. A commemorative plaque indicates where home plate used to be, but the Casebreakers, utilizing satellite images and old aerial photographs, found that the marker is misplaced by about 90 feet. As part of an 18-page report submitted to the FBI, the investigative team outlined exactly where they think Hoffa is, or at least where he might have been buried. Zimmerman performed ground-penetrating radar tests at the location in 2020 and found a disturbed area almost precisely where third base would have been. The radar could only reach 5 feet beneath the third base area due to an unexpected layer of clay obstructing the radar, according to Zimmerman, who believes this indicates that a dig occurred that was quickly filled back in. The skilled team of investigators also brought in a leading cadaver dog expert, Karen Corcoran, whose K-9, Moxie, reportedly indicated several positive signals of remains in the vicinity. The FBI acknowledged their findings earlier, but Zimmerman claims that the Bureau has been skeptical about the Casebreakers' discoveries, or at least reluctant to pursue further investigation. He claimed he had always kept a close eye on those searches, and every time the answer was no, he would smile, feeling like Jimmy was still under third base in Milwaukee. So each time another search didn't work out, it boosted his confidence until he finally took this case to the case breakers. Zimmerman mentioned it was now with the FBI, and they're going to help the FBI as much as they let them because they operate independently. He further stated that he was part of an FBI task force for 4 years, and they weren't always great at accepting help or advice, and they were now at the mercy of the FBI regarding how they wanted to handle it. Zimmerman got involved in the Hoffa conspiracy back in 1996, just before Harlold Walters passed away after a short illness in 1997. Before he passed, Walters handed the card to his niece Michelle and said that if anything happened to him, she'll know what to do. According to case breakers, Walters faced charges for jewelry robbery, bribery, extortion, and more during his 20 years in law enforcement. The group thinks he became a trusted ally of mafia boss Aiuppa, who allegedly gave him a house next to his estate years before Hoffa disappeared. The case breakers believe that the date on Walters' card, September 16, 1995, marks the day Hoffa was buried under third base at County Stadium. They also have a theory about where Hoffa's body was kept before that, which again ties back to Walters. According to their research, months before Hoffa disappeared in 1975, Walters abruptly left his home on Aiuppa's estate to relocate to Minocqua, Wisconsin. Zimmerman mentioned that Walter boasted to his fishing buddies about having cased Hoffa prior to his murder and was aware of where he was buried. Shortly after Hoffa's disappearance, he relocated to a trailer in a secluded area of Northwood within 2 months. The case breakers are investigating if Walters might have concealed Hoffa's body in the Northwood vicinity before the supposed reburial at the stadium in 1995. Zimmerman claims that Walters' fishing friends from Wisconsin informed him that every year, a group of well-dressed men in suits would visit Northwood and give him an envelope filled with what they thought was cash. Zimmerman suspects that Walters could have been receiving payments from the mob for keeping quiet, or possibly for some ongoing service related to Hoffa. When Hoffa was reportedly reburied in September 1995, the Brewers were away on a road trip with 9 games left in their season. They came back home on the 22nd to start a homestand to finish the season, raising the question of how conspirators could have buried a body under third base during the season without being seen. Unlike his colleagues at the case breakers, Zimmerman thinks that the date on Walters' playing card indicates when Walters was informed of Hoffa's burial location, not necessarily when Hoffa was actually buried. Greg Hoffman, a seasoned journalist who wrote a book about County Stadium's history, Down in the Valley, was brought in by the case breakers for consultation on this issue. Despite this, Zimmerman and the case breakers think that their ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dog findings deserve a closer look at the old County Stadium site. They weren't requesting the FBI to dig up the whole area, but instead, they wanted to take soil samples from the specific plot of land to check for any signs of human decomposition. They plan to drill down 20 feet through the concrete under the pavilion to find out what the K9 was alerted to. Zimmerman explained that they never informed the handler where the third base would be and never indicated that they anticipated finding something beneath the third base, and while the dog was out there doing its thing, it alerted right where third base was on 4 different occasions. With that being said, that indicated to him that their ground-penetrating radar was accurate and there was or is a body there. He further mentioned that the dogs will only alert on something that is a dead body, that even though the believed location of County Stadium's third base is now covered in concrete, the dog alerted in a nearby area on a grassy patch. While he was sure Hoffa was once buried on the stadium's grounds, he has stated he is 50-50 on whether his remains are still there. Regardless, Zimmerman insists he is committed to uncovering the truth behind this intriguing mystery once and for all. He stated that he had been in charge of investigations, he has looked into homicides, and he's really curious about what the results of all this were. He had no patience, of course, but being this close to everything, he hoped they could find out one way or another. Zimmerman claimed he's 65% confident that he and the case breakers can figure out what happened to Hoffa. His uncertainty came from the possibility that if Hoffa's body was moved from County Stadium, any of the very few people who witnessed that event were probably long gone. As shocking as the findings were, they only made one question more urgent. What exactly happened on the day Hoffa disappeared? Let's find out. Hoffa's disappearance and investigation. Hoffa's ambitions to reclaim the union leadership faced resistance from various mafia members. One notable figure was Anthony Provenzano, who had served as a Teamsters local leader in New Jersey and held the position of national vice president during Hoffa's second term as president. Provenzano was a caporegime in the Genovese crime family based in New York City. At least two of Provenzano's rivals within the union had been killed, and others who opposed him had been attacked. Initially, Provenzano was an ally of Hoffa, but they turned into enemies after a reported conflict while both were incarcerated at the federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Hoffa sought Provenzano's backing to reclaim his previous role, but Provenzano declined and allegedly threatened Hoffa, saying he would disembowel him or kidnap his grandchildren. Other mafia figures who got involved included Anthony Giacalone, a suspected leader in the Detroit Mafia, and his younger brother Vito. The FBI suspects they were trying to act as mediators between Hoffa and Provenzano. The Giacalone brothers visited Hoffa's residence in Lake Orion 3 times and made one trip to the Guardian Building law offices. They claimed their goal was to arrange a peace meeting between Hoffa and Provenzano. Hoffa's son James expressed concern, stating that his father was pushing so hard to get back in office and he was increasingly afraid that the mob would do something about it. James believed that the peace meeting was merely a cover for Giacalone's plan to set Hoffa up for an assassination, as Hoffa had grown more anxious with each visit from the Giacalone brothers. Hoffa vanished on Wednesday, 30th of July, 1975, after attending a meeting with Provenzano and Giacalone. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Machus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, a suburb of Detroit. This location was also where Hoffa's son James had his wedding reception. Hoffa noted Giacalone's initials along with the time and place of the meeting in his office calendar. Hoffa departed from his Lake Orion home at 1:15 p.m. Before going to the restaurant, he made a stop at the Pontiac office of his good friend Louis Linteau, who was a former president of Teamsters Local 614 and now operated a limousine service. Although Hoffa and Linteau had been rivals at the start of their careers, they eventually became friends. After Hoffa was released from prison, Linteau took on the role of Hoffa's unofficial appointments secretary and set up a dinner meeting for Hoffa with the Giacalone brothers on July 26, where they informed him about the meeting on the 30th of July. When Hoffa visited, Linteau was out for lunch, so Hoffa spoke with some staff members and left a message for Linteau before heading to the Machus Red Fox. Between 2:15 and 2:30 p.m., an irritated Hoffa called his wife from a payphone located on a post in front of Dahmen Hardware, which is right behind the Machus Red Fox. He complained that Giacalone hadn't shown up and that he felt stood up. His wife replied that she hadn't heard from anyone. He informed her that he would be back home in Lake Orion by 4 p.m. to grill steaks for dinner. Several witnesses noticed Hoffa by his car, pacing around the restaurant's parking lot. Two men recognized Hoffa, stopped to briefly chat, and shook his hand. Hoffa also made a call to Linteau expressing his frustration that the men were late. Linteau mentioned it was 3:30 p.m., but the FBI believed it was earlier based on the timing of other calls from Linteau's office around that time. The FBI estimates that Hoffa left the area without any struggle around 2:45 to 2:50 p.m. One witness claimed to have seen Hoffa in the back of a maroon Lincoln or Mercury car, along with 3 other individuals. At 7 a.m. the following morning, Hoffa's wife reached out to her son and daughter to inform them that their father had not returned home. By 7:20 a.m., Linteau went to the Machus Red Fox and discovered Hoffa's car, which was unlocked in the parking lot, but there was no trace of Hoffa or any clues about what might have happened to him. Linteau contacted the police, who soon arrived at the location. The Michigan State Police were called in and the FBI was notified. At 6 p.m., Hoffa's son, James, submitted a missing person report. The Hoffa family offered a reward of $200,000 for any information regarding his disappearance. The main piece of physical evidence collected during the investigation was a maroon 1975 Mercury Marquis Brougham, owned by Anthony Giacalone's son, Joseph. Earlier that day, Charles Chucky O'Brien had borrowed the car to deliver fish. O'Brien was Hoffa's foster son, but their relationship had deteriorated in the years leading up to Hoffa's disappearance. Investigators and Hoffa's family believed that O'Brien might have been involved in Hoffa's vanishing. On August 21, police dogs detected Hoffa's scent inside the car. Giacalone and Provenzano, who claimed they never arranged a meeting with Hoffa, were determined not to have been close to the restaurant that day. However, he told investigators that he was actually playing cards with Stephen Andretta, the brother of Thomas Andretta, in Union City, New Jersey, on the day Hoffa went missing. Even with extensive surveillance and wiretapping, investigators discovered that mafia members were mostly reluctant to discuss Hoffa's disappearance, even when they were alone. On December 4, 1975, a federal investigator in Detroit testified in front of Judge James Paul Churchill that a witness had pointed out 3 men from New Jersey as having been involved in the abduction of James R. Hoffa. These 3 men were close associates of Provenzano: Thomas Andretta, Salvatore Briguglio, and his brother Gabriel Briguglio. In October 1975, Michigan Attorney General Frank J. Kelly traveled to Waterford Township to oversee a failed attempt to find and dig up Hoffa's remains. This search was initiated by a tip from an anonymous informant who claimed a group of mafiosi wanted Hoffa's body discovered. After many years of investigation involving several law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, officials still haven't come to a clear conclusion about Hoffa's fate or who was involved. Hoffa's wife, Josephine, passed away on September 12, 1980, and is buried at Whitechapel Memorial Cemetery in Troy, Michigan. In 2001, the FBI found DNA from Hoffa's hair, taken from a brush, that matched a hair found in Joseph Giacaloni's car. But it's possible that Hoffa had been in that car on a different occasion. In 2006, the Detroit Free Press released the full Hoffex memo, a 56-page document created by the FBI for a January 1976 briefing on the case at the FBI headquarters in Washington. While it doesn't definitively establish the details of his disappearance, the memo expresses a belief that Hoffa was killed at the request of organized crime figures who saw his attempts to regain power in the Teamsters as a threat to their control over the union's pension fund. The Hoffex memo concluded, based on the evidence, that Chucky O'Brien, who FBI investigators labeled a habitual liar, was driving Joseph Giacaloni's maroon Mercury with the license plate TMS 416 on the day Hoffa went missing, and that Hoffa was in the right rear seat of the vehicle. Police dogs picked up his body scent, and they found a piece of his hair in the back seat. A pump-action 12-gauge shotgun was taken from the trunk, and several bullets were discovered in the glove compartment. As of 2021, searches were still being carried out in the Detroit area for Hoffa's body, but many experts believe that his body was cremated. Dan Moldea, a journalist known for his extensive writing on the Hoffa saga, stated that the FBI did not search in the precise location he suggested. Moldea shared with the press that he was not happy with the outcome. In 2021, the FBI contacted Moldea after he released a thorough account from Frank Cappola, who was a teenager in the 1970s and worked at the old PJP landfill near the bridge. Cappola recounted how his father, Paul Cappola, who also worked at the landfill, described the delivery of Hoffa's body there in 1975, placed inside a steel drum and buried alongside other barrels, bricks, and dirt. Fearing that the police might be observing, Paul Cappola dug a hole on New Jersey state land, approximately 100 yards from the landfill, and later relocated the unmarked barrel there, as per Moldea. Frank Cappola signed a sworn statement before he passed away in 2020, but Moldea mentioned that the FBI informed him it did not excavate in the exact area he had suggested because radar indicated nothing unusual underground. But long before the mystery and the manhunt, Hoffa was a force to be reckoned with. To understand why so many people wanted him silenced, we need to look at how he rose to power. Let's find out. Jimmy Hoffa's rise to power. Hoffa fought to protect the Teamsters from attacks by other unions, such as the Congress of Industrial Organizations, and he expanded the Teamsters' reach in the Midwest from the late 1930s until the late 1940s. Hoffa managed to get a deferment from military service during World War II by arguing that his skills in union leadership were more beneficial to the country by ensuring freight was delivered efficiently to support the war effort. Even though he never actually drove a truck, he became the president of Local 299 in December 1946. Shortly after, he took charge of the combined group of locals in the Detroit area and eventually became the leader of the Michigan Teamsters. At the 1952 IBT convention in Los Angeles, Hoffa was appointed as national vice president by the new president Dave Beck, who succeeded Daniel J. Tobin, the president since 1907. Hoffa had put down a rebellion against Tobin by gaining the support of the Central States region for Beck at the convention. In return, Beck appointed Hoffa as a vice president. In 1952, a small-time criminal from New York named Marvin Elkind was assigned by gangster Anthony Salerno to be Hoffa's chauffeur. In a 2008 interview, Elkind reflected on his 4 years as a chauffeur, saying that Mr. Hoffa was a very intimidating figure. He had no fear whatsoever, showed very little emotion, had no sense of humor, and was completely devoted to the members of his union. He also said that when he drove these people, he learned a lot because they didn't realize he's there. He becomes just another part of the car, like an extra gear shift or brake, and they talk freely. The IBT relocated its headquarters from Indianapolis to Washington, D.C., taking over a big office building in the Capitol in 1955. IBT staff also grew, with many lawyers being hired to help with contract negotiations. After being elected vice president in 1952, Hoffa started spending more time away from Detroit, either in Washington or traveling across the country for his new responsibilities. Hoffa's personal lawyer was Bill Bufalino. In 1957, Hoffa became the president of the Teamsters at the convention in Miami Beach, Florida. His predecessor, Beck, had testified before the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Improper Activities in Labor or Management field, led by John L. McClellan in March 1957, where he took the Fifth Amendment 140 times. Beck was under indictment when the IBT convention occurred and was later convicted and imprisoned for fraud in a trial held in Seattle. After being re-elected as president in 1961, Hoffa aimed to grow the union. In 1964, he managed to unite almost all over-the-road truck drivers in North America under a single national master freight agreement, which might have been his greatest accomplishment in a lifetime of union work. Hoffa then attempted to include airline workers and other transport employees in the union, but with limited success. He faced a lot of personal pressure as he was under investigation, on trial, appealing convictions, or imprisoned for nearly all of the 1960s. Hoffa was re-elected without any opposition for a third 5-year term as the president of the IBT, even though he had been found guilty of jury tampering and mail fraud in court rulings that were put on hold while awaiting an appeal review. Delegates in Miami Beach also chose Frank Fitzsimmons as the first vice president, who would take over as president if Hoffa has to go to jail. In 1957, Hoffa was under serious criminal investigations due to the McClellan Committee. On March 14, 1957, he was arrested for allegedly attempting to bribe an aide to the Select Committee. Hoffa denied these accusations and was later found not guilty, but the arrest led to further investigations and more arrests and indictments in the weeks that followed. One of Hoffa's associates, Frank Kierdorf, accidentally set himself on fire on the night of August 3, 1958, while trying to torch a cleaning and dyeing business. When John F. Kennedy became president in 1960, he appointed his younger brother Robert as Attorney General. Robert Kennedy had been frustrated in his earlier efforts to convict Hoffa while serving as counsel to the McClellan Subcommittee. As Attorney General starting in 1961, Kennedy launched a vigorous campaign against organized crime and continued with a so-called Get Hoffa team of prosecutors and investigators. On December 5, 1962, during a court hearing, a former mental patient named Warren Swanson shot several pellets at Hoffa. Fortunately, the pellets caused no injury, and an angry Hoffa retaliated by punching Swanson and knocking him down, while Charles Chucky O'Brien and others helped to subdue him. In May 1963, Hoffa faced indictment for jury tampering in Tennessee, accused of trying to bribe a grand juror during his conspiracy trial in Nashville. He was found guilty and received an 8-year prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. While he was out on bail during his appeal, Hoffa was convicted again in a second trial in Chicago for 1 count of conspiracy and 3 counts of mail and wire fraud related to the misuse of the Teamsters Pension Fund, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence. Hoffa spent the next 3 years trying unsuccessfully to appeal his convictions. Appeals made by his main lawyer, Morris Schenker, reached the U.S. Supreme Court. He began serving his total prison sentence of 13 years, 8 years for bribery and 5 years for fraud, at the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. When Hoffa went to prison, Frank Fitzsimmons took over as acting president of the union, and Hoffa intended to manage the union from behind bars through Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons was a loyal supporter of Hoffa, a fellow resident of Detroit, and a longtime member of Teamsters Local 299, who largely owed his high position to Hoffa's influence. However, Fitzsimmons began to distance himself from Hoffa's control, which displeased Hoffa. Under 5 years into his 13-year sentence, Hoffa was let out of prison after U.S. President Richard Nixon reduced his sentence to time served. Because of Hoffa's earlier resignation, he received a $1,075,000 lump sum termination benefit from the Teamsters Retirement and Family Protection Plan. This kind of pension payout had never happened with the Teamsters before. The IBT then supported Nixon, a Republican, in his presidential re-election campaign in 1972. In earlier elections, the union typically backed Democratic candidates, but they changed their stance and endorsed Nixon in 1960. Hoffa got his freedom back, but Nixon's commutation meant that Hoffa couldn't engage in the direct or indirect management of any labor organization until March 6, 1980. Hoffa argued that he never agreed to that condition. He accused high-ranking Nixon administration officials, including Attorney General John N. Mitchell and White House Special Counsel Charles Colson, of violating his rights by enforcing that condition. It was believed that the Teamsters leadership had requested this condition be placed on Hoffa, but Fitzsimmons denied that. By 1973, Hoffa was making plans to reclaim the presidency of the Teamsters. Hoffa encountered significant opposition in his efforts to regain power from various groups and had lost a lot of his previous backing, even in Detroit. Consequently, he planned to kick off his comeback at the local level with Local 299 in Detroit, where he still had some sway. In 1975, Hoffa was in the process of writing an autobiography titled Hoffa, The Real Story, which came out a few months after he went missing. He had previously released a book called The Trials of Jimmy Hoffa in 1970. At the time he passed away, Hoffa was living with his family at their summer cottage in Lake Orion, a village about a 30-minute drive from the restaurant where he was last spotted. His residence was situated on a large wooded property on Square Lake. The estate featured a house that was over 2,500 square feet, along with several outbuildings. In 1995, Hoffa's family held a memorial service for him. In 2023, a historical marker was placed in his home state of Indiana by the Indiana Historical Bureau, Clay County Historical Society, and the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.